very happy to be here. I love Pine Bush. I'm always so excited when I get off 17 and come to Pine Bush. So I am Sue Nichols from Orange County Office for the Aging, and I am their registered dietitian nutritionist. I'm a certified diabetes care and education specialist. They just changed my title, and I recently recertified, so I have all this information in my brain swarming, waiting to share with you. So we're talking about heart health today, and it's actually National Diabetes Awareness Month. So I'll probably throw in some diabetes stuff just because it's recently there in my head again. And it's really important to keep your heart healthy, especially if you have diabetes, because you're at increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease. And please feel free to stop me at any point and ask a question. I like questions. Okay. So when we talk about cardiovascular disease, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about blood pressure, and I did bring my blood pressure set here if you'd like me to check your blood pressure before I leave. We talk about cholesterol. We talk about the pipes in our heart. We talk about keeping them clear and hoping to have good cholesterol numbers so that we don't have an increased risk of heart attack and stroke. We talk about the heart. We also talk about having a normal rhythm. So you can have many cardiac arrhythmias, some which can be brought on by diet, lots that can be brought on by stress. I don't know if anybody has stress, but I have my share. I definitely have my share of that. So, and even when you talk about stress, that has to do with your cholesterol too, because many times people eat unhealthy foods, even if they know otherwise not to, when they're stressed out. So people do some compulsive overeating and stress eating, and we're very rarely looking at broccoli and things like that when we're stressed out. We're looking for comfort foods, mac and cheese and mashed potatoes and cookies and cakes and pies and all those things. But those have a lot to do with our heart health. And when we overeat those, we are more likely to be overweight, which is going to put extra stress on our heart. We're more likely to have prediabetes or diabetes. And about 80% of people with prediabetes don't even know they have it. So that's a really big problem. And that's one reason that November is Awareness Month for both prediabetes and diabetes. And too much salt. We have too much salt in our diet, our blood pressure goes up, we retain fluids. So we're going to talk about all of these things. We're going to talk about fats, we're going to talk about salt, we're going to talk about trying to keep a healthy weight, and fiber, which is why I handed out packets of oatmeal. So you want to especially talk about soluble fiber, which oatmeal has. So let's talk about blood pressure first. So I mentioned this before when you had some questions. Normal blood pressure is between 100 and 120 on top. So that is the systolic pressure. Some people have trouble remembering that, but I think of SCI with systolic, so they both start with S. Oh, hi. And the diastolic pressure, which is the pressure on the bottom, should be between somewhere around 60 to 79. So doctors are sometimes happier as we get older with numbers a little higher than that. But blood pressure does vary quite a bit. So we like to keep an eye on it. And I can't tell you, you have to sign in. Okay, I could do that before you leave. There's some handouts for you. People definitely have problems with their blood pressure when they're stressed. I recently had a trip to the doctor, and usually when I go to the doctor I have barely visible blood pressure, but I was very stressed that day and it was through the roof. So once I calmed down and we took it again, it was okay. But sometimes when we go to the doctor's office, we're in a rush to get there. We might run up the stairs or run to the elevator, so very often they like us to sit for a little while, and you should rest for a little bit before you check your blood pressure. But the first blood pressure that they take when the doctor's office checks it is sometimes likely to be higher, and then they like to recheck it. So it is a good idea to check your blood pressure numerous times during the day. I'm going to give some handouts to people that just came in. I want to just pass these around so you can keep up with what I'm saying. You want to grab those handouts. So even if you have high blood pressure, it's very important to take your medication. And one of the biggest things that I find is that people that take blood pressure medicines also like to get their medicines and their supplements all out of the way first thing in the morning, so they take them by the handful and everything's all together, and that's not a good thing to do. So when you take blood pressure medicine or any other medicine, you really should be taking it with a full glass of water and no supplements. What happens when you take any kind of medication with something like calcium or potassium or magnesium, something that is a mineral, iron is also one of those, so anything that multivitamin would also have those different nutrients in it, that can actually affect absorption of the medication. So it's a good thing to make sure that you take your medications without any supplements. Even taking something like a vitamin C, which is an acid, ascorbic acid, can change the absorption of medication. So you want to separate your meds from your supplements, especially thyroid medications. A lot of people take thyroid meds like levothyroxine, Synthroid, and that's always to be taken first thing in the morning. And you want to not have any medications or food for at least a half an hour or more. If you're doing a mineral like the potassium, iron, magnesium, you want to separate those by 4 hours. So it is important for the timing of your medications, including blood pressure medications, to make sure they're separate from your supplements. So when you take your blood pressure, things that can make it go up is that morning cup of coffee. So caffeine can raise your blood pressure, and you want to try to stick to decaf if possible. Sometimes you can get away with a cup or two in the morning, but if you're drinking coffee all day or tea all day or things like Pepsi or Diet Coke, those sodas that also have caffeine in it can make your blood pressure go up. So this time of year you might have allergies. I'm kind of allergic to everything outside that's growing, the ragweed and the pollen. So if you're taking any kind of medications for allergies, that will also raise your blood pressure, as will Motrin and Advil and any kind of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory med like those that you take for the arthritis pains and things like that. So try to stay away from those if your pressure runs a little high. Cough medicines and things like that are also going to have an increased effect on your blood pressure. So you really have to be careful, huh?
You just mentioned several things. Let's say cough medicine. Would it be better to because the sugar-free or the diabetic cough medicine, is that better?
So that's not going to affect blood pressure, right, but it will affect blood sugar. Okay. And then most of those sugar-free versions, diabetic versions of medications have sugar alcohols in them. Sugar alcohols don't raise blood pressure, but they give people a lot of stomach gas and bloating. It could give you some diarrhea and urgency. So it's better for people with diabetes to not have the sugar syrupy kind of cold and cough medicines, but it's not going to affect blood pressure. So there are also coricidin, HBP labels on the boxes. That brand will not raise your blood pressure if that's a cold medicine. I was told that some of the knockoffs, the generic store brands, are not quite as good as that, and I actually had that experience with my mom, she was a snowbird. She was down in Florida, has high blood pressure, took her meds very religiously, but she was taking the store brand of coricidin HBP for a miserable cold that she had, and she ended up in the ER with crazy high blood pressure several times. So you got to be careful with all those. So talk to your pharmacist. They can direct you to which medications to take over the counter as far as if you have high blood pressure. But they will definitely raise it. I see it all the time. So blood pressure can be affected by lack of things in your diet. So potassium is really important to help manage blood pressure and keep it nice in a healthy range. So potassium is in foods like oranges, especially, and potatoes, and citrus like berries. Most fruits and vegetables have potassium. Bananas for sure, the one we all know. So most people don't get enough potassium, but it is important, and that is part of the DASH diet. I don't know if you ever heard of the DASH diet, which stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So it is important to get a number of nutrients, but potassium was one of the ones that are very important for, not only blood pressure, but heart health in general. So other things that can affect a person with high blood pressure is, as we're avoiding sodium, and we want to stick to less than 2,000 milligrams a day of sodium, you can sometimes find things in the store like Salt Sense and New Salt, which is NUSALT. And these are salt replacements or salt substitutes. So the problem with that is that they're made from potassium chloride, and there's that word potassium again, but they're so concentrated that they can actually make some people have too much potassium in their blood. So that would be people with kidney problems, people on specific heart medications that actually make the body hold on to potassium. And they're not good to cook with because they have a very bitter flavor if you heat them. So kind of keep an eye on those salt substitutes because they're not really necessary. And they do taste salty, but they can get you into trouble. So when I worked in the hospitals years ago, if you wanted a little packet of salt substitute on your tray, you would actually have to get a prescription from your doctor because it could really throw you out of whack as far as your potassium level. Potassium is one of those things that if it's too low in your blood or too high in your blood, you can get into a lot of trouble really fast. When they used to do executions, when they first started doing executions of prisoners, they would use potassium chloride. They would give them an injection of potassium and it would actually stop your heart. So when your potassium level is too high or too low, that's the phone call you get from the lab saying you need to come in, and we're going to either recheck it or give you something to take care of your potassium that has to be in a very narrow window of normal.
What about Mrs. Dash as a substitute?
So that's a wonderful question. Mrs. Dash has no potassium chloride in it, so it doesn't have the high potassium concerns. It's mostly, it's all different blends of herbs and spices. So they started out with like 1 year ago. Now they have like 20 of them.
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
When I went, I saw them and I'm saying, oh my.
You don't know which one to
read
pick.
the labels.
Yeah, you really
at least.
A lot of them have pepper, so if you have an acid reflux thing, you might not want to choose the ones with the pepper. The only people that need to kind of think about them if you're using them heavily are people on Coumadin or warfarin, because those are blood thinners.
Yes.
So one is the generic and one is the trade name, and herbs and spices have more vitamin K in them, and you know, if you're using them heavily, it can throw off your clotting times and things like that. So Mrs. Dash is wonderful because we tend to think that when something is low in salt, it has no flavor, because most of us grow up with salt. My kids went to college and they came home and they said, "What's a salt shaker? You never had it on the table before." So now we have one, but it's never on the table. I was always brought up in a house where my mother was watching her blood pressure, and we just never used salt. I never cooked with salt, and you know, so you get used to either not having salt. When I taste something really salty, it almost burns my mouth because I'm just used to no salt. And some people are more salt sensitive. I know if I eat something that's salty and I don't really realize it, you know, I tend to get a puffy face and puffy fingers and the rings don't fit. Some people are like that and some people aren't. But I do have to be careful with my salt, not because of my blood pressure, but I just tend to retain fluids with it. So salt is very important. It's a part of our body. When you have blood work done at the doctor's office, it's one of those electrolyte values that comes up on your lab report. And it's almost always in the normal range because we have our kidneys doing different things and our body has all these mechanisms to keep our electrolytes in the normal range because it's important. So salt is something that when we control it in our diet, we tend to have better blood pressures. But some people are very good with watching their salt and they still have high blood pressure. So the average number of medications to control a person's blood pressure that has high blood pressure is 3. 3 medications. That's a lot. So very often when you go to the doctors and you have high blood pressure and they kind of start you off, they'll probably start you with something like lisinopril, which is very protective for the kidneys. It's a medication doctors like to use for people that have diabetes because it has that nice built-in mechanism to preserve the kidney function. And then sometimes they have to add a water pill, or they add, some other kind of different medication that works in a different way to keep our blood pressure normal. So other things that can affect your blood pressure are stress. So as I mentioned, mine has been high on occasion when I'm a little stressed out. So it is important to try to control that part of your life if you can.
Easier said than done.
It is easier said than done. Sometimes you'd have to move members of the family out. But you can do a lot of things. I just did a program recently on stress and how to manage stress. And, sometimes it's just putting yourself in a nice quiet place and trying to change your thought processes, and not watching the news would be helpful also. That's very stressful.
I was told deep breathing too. That's you
Very helpful.
yes. Just go if you're in the bathroom or just alone in a room that you walk in and just take 2 seconds for deep breathing.
And they actually have apps on some of the new watches and telephones to do that.
Oh really?
My husband has a fib, and he'll be mostly out of it, but he can put himself in it when he's really upset. Because what stress does is it pumps up those stress hormones, the adrenaline, the epinephrine, and it can cause the heart to race, and people that are prone to heart arrhythmias can actually send themselves in just being stressed out. So we had this wonderful cardiologist, and he kind of sensed that my husband was one of those stressed out people, and he actually turned the lights out. He held our hands. He made us think nice, quiet thoughts. And he said, I want you to go home and do this. Didn't last very long. But things like yoga are also good, just the kind of meditation and things like that to kind of calm your mind down and try to avoid stress when you can. And again, stress can make us do things like overeating foods that aren't healthy for us. So we'll move on to fats in our diet. And there's lots of,
Can I ask a question?
of course.
What about water conditioners? Because there's, salt.
Well, that's a really good question. Yeah. So if you have a water softener, we're almost always putting salt pellets in it. So what I've read in the past is that it's about 60 to 80 milligrams per 8 ounces of water, which can add up if you're drinking, 50, 60 ounces of water. There are potassium chloride salt pellets that you can get instead, but again, you're adding potassium in a concentrated way, and they're much more expensive. So if you think it's a concern, you could always drink spring water, bottled water, which isn't going to have that. Water that doesn't have any sodium and it tastes extremely flat.
Yes.
But, it can be a consideration. So if you have water softener, water at home, and you want to really keep your salt intake as low as possible without, thinking about all those extra things, you could consider using some kind of unsalted water. But that's a really good question.
And the guy who just put ours in swore up and down, none of that salt comes into the water.
That's not what I've read.
Anyway, I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and he wanted to make those sales.
They wanted to make a sale.
They wanted to make a
Well,
sale.
we drink bottled water anyway,
Yeah.
but there's showering, there's,
Yeah, and
cooking.
then you have to think about the fluoride that's not getting in your water. If you have fluoridated water, like I lived in Washingtonville for most of my adult life, and they had no fluoride in their water. And some people think fluoride in your water is a good thing to help with your bones and your teeth, and some people think it's a bad thing because it can actually throw off your thyroid and things like that. So there's lots of considerations, but for the most part, I drink spring water. It doesn't have to be a fancy one, but and we do have a water softener.
I have an extra spigot on my kitchen sink. Even though I have a water softening conditioner or whatever, the water is filtrated again down. I actually have 2 filtration systems in the basement, and then it comes up and it's filtered again at the kitchen sink for this one spigot. And then they told me this water is to be used for cooking and drinking. The regular faucet is used for whatever else.
Washing and stuff like that, yeah. So is that a reverse osmosis?
Yes.
Yeah, we actually have one of those too. So they filter out a lot of impurities. We live now in Greenville, which has like sulfur in the water. So the house is always smelling like rotten eggs unless I do this whole chlorine system in my
That's
basement.
why I got what I got,
Yeah.
because it was horrible.
Horrible.
Stuff. It made you wanna, you'd gag on
Yep.
it, it was so bad. This system is wonderful. It took everything out of the water.
It does, yeah. It
Really
does.
nice.
Yeah, it is good. So yeah, you can kind of bypass those systems or put in additional filtration. And I don't know if it's going to filter out the sodium, but it would filter out the sulfur and other impurities. And we have well water where we live, which is why
Yeah.
the sulfur's a problem.
Yeah.
And most communities have like a water report once a year, and they tell you about the quality of their water.
Yeah, we know Pine Bush's water.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Pine Bush's water is
Oh,
not
it's
good.
disgusting.
It's not good.
It's manganese.
Okay.
Right.
Too much manganese.
But I have
Really?
that in Thompson Ridge too, and
You
it's
do?
got to do with the depths of the well. It's the depths of the well, because our well's not that deep, which is very anxiety producing. But it's better because then you're not getting the sulfur.
The sulfur, yeah. in a
Again,
deep well.
yeah, it's tough.
And even the amount of rainfall can
Oh,
make
sure.
make a difference. Oh my gosh, yeah, what a crazy summer we had. So
Sorry.
yeah, so you do. That's okay. So you do
It's
have to
fine,
think
next
about
time.
water and a water softener contributing to your intake of sodium for sure. For sure, it's
And
not.
How do we know spring water doesn't have?
Right, you don't.
You don't.
You have to test it. You
Yeah.
have to test it.
I've never heard that spring water has been a problem, but I have seen that, especially if you're on a very tight, like a 1,500 milligrams sodium diet a day for some cardiac patients, or maybe patients that have kidney problems, that just changing to a water that doesn't have the water softener tablets added to it can help reduce that. Because when you're looking at 1,500 milligrams as far as sodium in a day, it's really very, very low. And even without adding salt to your food, if you're eating any animal products, chicken, turkey, fish, sodium is just naturally a part of those animals. So we are taking it in before we even add the condiments and the
They
sauces.
also add sodium and water to the chickens in the packages.
They do. They add a broth solution
Yeah.
in many cases. All those rotisserie chickens are injected with broth and other chemicals. So
Keep them juicy.
yeah, so you can go from like maybe 100 milligrams and 3 ounces of chicken that has nothing added to it to 600 or 700. If it's a basted turkey or chicken type of thing, and then we're not even adding the sauces. That spaghetti sauce can be 300 or 400 milligrams or more, just in a quarter of a cup. So sodium adds up really quickly. We don't find any sodium in things like fruits and vegetables, very, very negligible. What is the vegetable everybody thinks is so high in sodium? Can you think of it? Celery, everybody thinks it's so high. So it's really not. Comparatively, it's higher than like carrots. So 3 ounces of carrots might have 10 milligrams of sodium, and 3 ounces of celery has like 25. So still negligible. But some people like to just talk about celery in a bad way. I love celery. So you do have to watch when you do spices. If you get like a garlic powder, it's not going to have sodium added. If you get a garlic salt, it's going to have salt added. So check even your condiments, your spices in your cupboards, because they can really add up. And that's where Mrs. Dash is nice. Mrs. Dash doesn't have any salt added to it, so that's really good. So we'll move on to fats in the diet. And back in the 90s, when all the studies like the Framingham heart study came out, we got a lot of misinformation about fats, and everybody was so afraid of fats causing heart disease that fats were kind of a no-no in the diet, and people just started eating more carbs. So then what happened is everybody gained weight and got diabetes. So we do know that some fats are not healthy for us. Trans fats are probably the worst fats that you could probably ever eat. And if you're looking at a nutrition label, you want a big 0 as far as trans fats. So trans fats are unnatural. They don't exist anywhere in nature. They're kind of a Frankenstein fat that we made in labs. And we all grew up with Crisco, right? Pie crust. So we know that they take vegetable oil and they hydrogenate it, and it becomes a solid, right? So vegetable oil, corn oil is not a solid at room temperature, but Crisco is. So that's what makes it hydrogenated. They bombard it with hydrogen atoms, and it makes a very good, stable kind of fat. They use it in frying in all the restaurants. If you ever worked at McDonald's, they use that oil for the French fries and all the fried fishes and things like that. They use it over and over and over. They use it, maybe change it every 2 weeks, which is pretty gross, yeah. But it is an economical type of fat, which is why it has become so popular. The other place we find trans fats in our diet, in our refrigerators, is stick margarine.
Excuse me.
So if you have any kind of a stick margarine at home, they have taken a vegetable oil, they've hydrogenated it, or partially hydrogenated it, and they made it into a solid so that it's in a stick form. But our body does not know what to do with those kind of fats, and it makes it very unhealthy for our heart, and we make cholesterol in the body from that and sugar. So we've kind of changed our minds about cholesterol in foods and what becomes cholesterol in the body. And you want to mostly stay away from trans fats and saturated fats. So there's good saturated fats and there's bad saturated fats. And the bad ones would be things like whole milk dairy, ice cream, which is everybody's favorite food mostly, heavy cream, sour cream, those things clog up the heart and predispose us to high cholesterol levels in the body and heart blockages in the heart. What we now know drives heart disease is actually inflammation, and inflammation comes from sugar in the diet, and too much sugar in the diet can cause higher blood sugar levels, which inflames pretty much every part of the body, and it causes changes in the artery walls. If you think about an artery in the body, it's about the diameter of a pencil. So if you were changing, say you ever taken fat and refrigerated it, it becomes a solid, right? So if you were drinking fat through a straw and it started clogging up the sides of the straw, you can think about what happens with an artery in the body. It becomes blocked, and you have a narrowed passageway for blood to flow. And when it becomes very occluded, very blocked, that's when we get chest pain and we can have heart attacks. And the artery walls have plaque, which is this accumulation of cholesterol. And when a piece of that plaque breaks off and travels, if it travels to the heart, we have a heart attack. If it travels to the brain, we have a stroke. So we want to try to keep that plaque accumulation off the artery walls by having a lower saturated fat diet, with the exception of good saturated fats. So avocados are good saturated fats, monounsaturated fats. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, is probably one of the best things you can include in your diet. It is very anti-inflammatory, and it has the same calories as all other fats, but it is very healthy for us to eat. So we don't want to avoid things like olive oil, especially the extra virgin, which is the first pressing of the olives. So it has the most antioxidants and nutrients in it. But we want to also use olive oil in the right way. So when you superheat any kind of fat by frying, which is usually 400 to 450 degrees, it actually chemically changes and physically changes the fat, oxidizing it and making it unhealthy fat. So if you're frying an olive oil, you're taking a really healthy oil and making it unhealthy. So you want to try not to fry.
I had no idea.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Also, like if you think about grilling outside or grilling in your house, and you're heating the meats to a really high temperature, you're really chemically and physically changing those bonds in the fat, making them unhealthy. And oxidized fat is one of the unhealthiest things we can eat. So I would avoid, super high temperatures for cooking, and avoid superheating any oil, even extra virgin olive oil.
How about canola oil?
So canola oil, I have bad news. And the American Heart Association has been telling us it's a good oil. It does have a good blend of polyunsaturated to monounsaturated. So that's, you could write like a book this thick about fats and chemistry of fats. But the problem with canola oil is that it's made from rape seeds. And rape seeds in this country are about 90 to 95% genetically modified. And genetically modified, which they say GMO, instead of this genetically modified organism, GMOs are very unhealthy for people and can be cancer causing. So I would say, unless you're using organic canola oil, I would avoid canola oil as an oil that you use a lot of.
So what do you suggest to fry in?
I
Don't
would
fry.
suggest not frying, which is kind of,
I know.
we have favorite foods that we like to do, the chicken cutlets and things like that. I would say grapeseed oil is a good one to use. Avocado oil is a good one. And extra virgin olive oil, but superheating to fry in any fat changes those good fats to unhealthy
Oven
fats.
fry it, is that the same thing?
About it?
Oven fry them?
Oven, yeah, so again, if you're not turning that heat up to 450 degrees, it's when you superheat them that it changes them. So I would
Oven
say,
frying at 425, so.
yeah,
Still bad.
I would still say, try to keep the temperature down. Like when I make chicken cutlets, I use egg whites and I'll put my breadcrumbs on, and then I will just quickly kind of sear them on the stove, and then I put a little low sodium organic chicken broth and I cook them in the oven, and they get very, very tender. They don't have that crispy crunch on the outside, but I know that I'm not doing unhealthy things with my oil. So yeah, it kind of changes the way we cook.
What about bone broth versus stock?
So bone broth has been popular recently. It has a lot of benefits to it. I would say always do organic bone broth, because if you've ever made your own bone broth, you stick all the bones in a big pot and you add some vinegar and you cook the heck out of them, and the vinegar kind of disintegrates the bones, and then the nutrients like the collagen and all the things that can be helpful for bone building go into the stock. So in an animal that's eating unhealthy foods, all of their things that are deposited in their bones are now going into the broth that you're drinking. So I would say do organic, and then you know that you don't have the pesticides and all the harmful things that they get some animals. One of the issues that happens with the bone broth is because it is something that has a lot of histamines in it. Any kind of broth in general has histamines, but bone broth is more concentrated. It can cause, for some people that have like a predisposition to like sinus things, when you have more histamines, it can make you have an allergic response. So some people, when they start drinking a lot of bone broth, can have like a stuffiness, a nasal stuffiness, and a post-nasal drip. So if you're one of those people, I wouldn't do a lot of bone broth, but always do organic. It does make a wonderful soup base. If you have arthritis pains, it can be anti-inflammatory, but it can cause some sinus issues for some people.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I always do low sodium, because you can buy it low sodium. There's like 16 different kinds of buying broth, and so low sodium organic, and for just making like a soup stock or something, I usually just do organic regular broth.
Okay.
It can also raise for people that have gouty arthritis, because there are concentrated sources of purines in animal concentrated extracts like gravies and soup bases that can also increase some people's gouty arthritis. So depending on what your health, there's no cookie cutter information for everybody. If you have this, then maybe that's not good. If you have this, then maybe you should think about that. So, but in general, people love bone broth, and it's nice this time of year when it's something warm and kind of comforting to drink. I do use it, but I don't use it all the time. When I'm having seasonal allergies, I don't use it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Almond butter. I know you say to restrict it because it's a saturated fat.
So almond butter is an alternative to peanut butter, and some people have problems with peanuts. Any kind of nut butter is probably a really good source of protein. It's going to have monounsaturated fats as well as some polyunsaturated fats. I would not really say that you'd have to limit it. If you're eating cups of it, the calories would be the biggest problem. Because like nuts, if a couple nuts are very healthy for you, and they're going to give you, some magnesium and some zinc and some protein. But if you overdo and do handfuls, you can find yourself gaining weight. So if you want to gain weight, it's a good way to gain weight because it is a good fat. But I would not say, there could be a lot of sodium in nut butters. Some peanut butters have a lot of salt. There can be some added sugars in nut butters. So, a lot of people just like the ones that you buy kind of all natural, which tends to be pretty runny.
The Maranatha, I think it's called. example seems to be just the almond,
Mhm.
says, anyway.
No, I think it's a good thing, and you know, you can't go have lunch in a school anymore with a peanut butter sandwich because of the peanut
Or they have a
allergies.
table at certain schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know in my daughter's kids' school that they can't have peanut butter. It's just not allowed in the school. So you know, almond butter is a good alternative to that. And not, I've never really heard anybody have too much of a problem with almonds as far as an allergy. I don't know how they get away with serving peanuts on an airplane, because you've got a contained space with potentially people that have allergies, and they're handing out bags of peanuts like it's. So almond butter is a thumbs up, and you can use it in baking. My grandkids come up most weekends, and one of their favorite things to do is to make like a protein. It's actually peanut butter protein breakfast bar, and it's just, you know, on the go type of thing when they're running out the door to school. But you can use almond butter in a lot of recipes where you use peanut butter. So no, I love almond butter. So we were talking about, let me just see what I left out on the subject of fats. So trans fats are the ones that you really don't want to.
Thank you. I have to leave. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks so much, though.
You're welcome. Saturated fats are ones you want to watch. The trans fats are ones you want to have nothing of. When you're looking at a food label, it has to list total fats, saturated fats. They have to list trans fats. But here's like the clincher. Manufacturers know that if something has less than 0.5 grams of trans fat, they can put a 0 on the label. So if you're having a lot of foods with, you know, less than, but not much less than 0.5 grams of trans fats, it can add up and become very healthy. So they want us to have none, but you could add up and have several grams in a day, which can raise your cholesterol. So the way to find out if it has any trans fat is to look for the words hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated in the ingredients. And if you see that, then you know that it's got some trans fats in it. So probably the worst thing that you could eat that has trans fat besides Crisco would be cake frosting, which everybody loves. But you know, if you look at the ingredients on it, it may say 0 trans fats, but it's always got hydrogenated fats in it. Mm-hmm.
If one enjoys a good steak and there's marbling in the steak, is that a trans fat?
No. Trans fat is a fat that started out as a plant-based fat that has been hydrogenated in a factory to become a solid fat. Okay. Trans fats can also be like partially solid, like a partially hydrogenated. So the safe way to eat steak, and a lot of people love their steak, is to do grass-fed. So grass-fed steaks are lower in saturated fat. Ground beef, if you're looking for a really good ground beef that's grass-fed, there's one called Lara's, L-A-R-A-S, Lara's beef. I've only seen it in ShopRite and Target. And it comes like a packet of like 1 pound ground beef. You can also buy it in hamburger patties. So we don't eat beef very often, but when my husband really feels like it, or Molly's visiting my grandchild, she's got to have tacos. So we do healthy tacos with Lara's ground beef. There's hardly any fat when you cook it. And instead of being like 23 grams of total fat in a 4-ounce portion, there's 7, which is huge. As far as the difference.
Yeah.
Huge. And you can also buy grass-fed steaks, and they're expensive. Like, you won't want to eat a lot of it because it's so much money. But that's good. We want to eat a small portion. Mm-hmm.
What about ground turkey? I don't eat beef. I have high cholesterol. I eat a lot of chicken and ground turkey.
So you would fit right in my house. I am famous for my ground turkey meatballs.
Okay.
So I make meatloaf with ground turkey.
Yeah.
So I don't do the 99% fat-free ground turkey because it's so dry.
Yeah,
It's like
80.
inedible. So I buy the 93%, and then you try to cook it on a rack. And but ground turkey is a great substitute for ground beef for sure.
And there's the trick with nutmeg. Do you remember that? on,
I
you
don't.
put in like an eighth or a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg, and it tastes like beef. I
Really?
tricked my husband.
Really?
So that now,
Try
even if
that.
I make something with beef, he says, "Is this turkey? Is it beef?"
Really?
I said, no, yeah, it was a
I
roaster.
never heard that.
It's very tiny amount.
Nutmeg.
Try it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not really a nutmeg person, but I will try it.
No,
No,
right.
I'm not either,
Yeah.
but if it makes it taste more like beef.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
it's
But you
funny.
can make tacos with ground turkey. You can, you can really substitute it. It's
Oh,
great.
I do for
Yeah.
everything.
Everything. And usually, I think there's 3 main brands of ground turkey out there, and it's the 99%, the 93%, and I think the 85%
Yeah,
fat-free.
80.
Yeah.
It's an 85.
And you can always mix. I'm famous for mixing stuff.
I'll mix it with the lid.
Yeah, you can, and it's quite wonderful. We use ground turkey all the time in our house.
Yeah.
I still try to put it on a rack if I'm making a meatloaf with it, but
Between chicken and ground turkey, I'm starting to grow feathers.
yes, we're poultry people.
Yeah. Walk, walk. Oh, terrible.
It's the dark meat that I was shocked because we went to one of the local, not a fast food restaurant, but a nice, healthy place to eat. And they had a chicken teriyaki bowl, and my husband had it, and he loved it. And he's like, I love it. It had dark meat chicken in it. I don't really cook with chicken thighs or anything like that. So if you go online, you can find a lot of copycat recipes. So I found a copycat recipe for this teriyaki chicken, which can be really high in sodium, but we reduced that. And so I tried the chicken thighs, the boneless chicken thighs, and I was shocked how high the saturated fat and cholesterol was. And I did it once, I think, and I never went back and cooked with it because it's just so high, it's not worth it. So, a lot of white meat chicken is a little bit drier, but the dark meat, yeah, I only like white meat. So I would say, if you're a dark meat turkey person at Thanksgiving, just try to do a little bit. The purines is also higher in the dark meat. So people that get gout around Thanksgiving, just try to do less of the dark meat. And things like gravies, which are made from extracts, the drippings from the turkey, those can also kick up gouty arthritis this time of the year. So, oh my goodness, I'm running out of time. So let me just see what I really
I'm
want.
just gonna jump in, cause we don't, well, Montgomery has ShopRite. Hannaford, now, don't buy all my ground beef, has a Vermont, it's called Vermont Country Farms Organic Ground Beef, that's grass fed. That's the only one I can eat, and I can eat very little of it.
So how's the total fat on it? Because you can have a grass-fed beef that's 23 grams of fat or a grass-fed beef that's 7 grams of fat.
Well, it's 80% lean, 20% fat is what
Okay.
it says. That
So
doesn't
it's
have
probably
the back
pretty
of the
high
package.
still. But again, you can always eat less. You don't have to eat a steak that weighs a pound. You can eat a smaller steak, for
I
sure.
bought my meat from online
Okay,
from Wild Fork Foods in Fort Lauderdale, Florida,
okay.
and their meats are organic and grass fed and
They come
whatnot.
frozen and on ice and
Yeah, flash frozen and on ice, and their meats are really good and they're less money than the supermarket.
really
Yes, I
Wow.
buy the ground turkey in the 1 pound thing.
like a tube.
The tube, it's like $2 and change, and then the organic one is like $7 or $8 and change.
Yeah, organic meats are very
Right,
expensive.
but
yeah,
still, that's less than you would pay for it in the store.
absolutely.
So,
And you can always buy bigger packages and break it down
Well,
into smaller
exactly,
ones. Yeah, but
exactly.
usually organic meats are in small packages because the price when it becomes $20 for a little package of something, people are,
Right.
and it sits there forever. But there are some things worth buying organic. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Dirty Dozen. Most men's favorite movie. But the
yeah, I've heard of this.
The Dirty Dozen is the environmental working group. They come out with a list every March, and it's the dirtiest fruits and vegetables as far as pesticides, herbicides, and other things that are sprayed on our crops. So every year they come out with this list of the 12 dirtiest and the 15 cleanest, so that you don't have to buy all organic. Like, it's a waste to buy organic bananas because we don't eat the peel, and nothing penetrates the peel. But things like berries, very hard to, can't scrub a berry, there's nothing left of it. So berries are like the dirtiest fruit as far as pesticides and things like that. So it does pay health-wise to buy organic.
Or pick your own.
or pick your own.
Well,
There go a lot of local farmers that are feeding their own family. They don't go through the organic certification, which costs $10,000 a year, and but they don't want to feed their family all these chemicals. So if you know your farmer and you know he's not doing all those spraying of those crops, or I'll buy like organic strawberries that are frozen. And the stores are now doing their brands. So you can buy ShopRite or Hannaford's or Price Choppers organic fruits, and it's a lot less than buying, Cascadian Farms or another very pricey type of organic fruit or vegetable that's frozen. But it is a way to use organic and not have to pay as much money. Plus, when you buy organic fresh berries, they're like dead in 2 days, and they're growing moldy, oldie stuff. So it is a good idea to buy frozen, and I use that in smoothies and desserts and all kinds of things that you can.
And I've heard different people, cooks, say that frozen is sometimes at its height, it's frozen.
Yes,
So
within
it-
2 hours.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
within 2 hours, of picking, it's flash frozen.
Right.
So you can just kind of take what you need out of the bag. It
Exactly.
still has all of its vitamin C and all those, good antioxidants in it, but you're not paying as much per pound for sure. I mean, it's one thing when it's, spring and summer and you got these local crops, but this time of year we're getting stuff from Central
Imported,
America and Florida.
It doesn't even last 2 days.
It doesn't last 2
I
days.
don't
and
know
you
what
spend
kind
a lot of
of
money.
air container you have.
Yeah.
It still goes bad.
So organic can be very expensive, but you don't always have to buy organic. Like a cantaloupe, you're not eating the outside peel. So wash it really well, and you don't have to spend all that extra money on organic. We didn't talk about a lot of things, but I do have information on your handout about heart healthy supplements, which a lot of people have questions about. Many people take statins for lowering cholesterol. Statins can do a number on your body, a lot of side effects. One of the things that statins will do, especially in higher doses for long periods of time, is to reduce CoQ10 levels in the body. And CoQ10 is something that's very important. It is something that is reduced to practically nothing when you're on like 40 or 80 milligrams of a statin, especially the stronger ones. So CoQ10 is a good supplement to consider and talk to your doctor about it, because there can be some interactions. I would say one of the best brands to buy is Cunol, which you can get right at Walmart. Many times with supplements, they're going to add black pepper, which is also called bioperine or pepper nigra. They'll add it to a supplement to increase absorption. The problem with that is if you have an acid reflux, that black pepper extract is going to make you really unhappy and really kick up acid reflux. So CoQ10 is really something that's good to take. Usually 100 or 200 milligrams will meet everybody's needs. There is a blood test that can tell you actually if you are short on CoQ10 in the body. Check with your insurance company before you run that, because lab tests can run a lot of money, but if the doctor puts down a specific diagnosis code, it may be paid for. But I would say if you're on a statin, if you've been on a statin for a long time, it is a good idea to consider CoQ10 as a supplement. Speaking of statins, there's a lot of studies that have shown that specific statins for lowering cholesterol can actually increase your risk of developing diabetes by as much as 22%, especially at higher doses. So the ones that are in question are Crestor and Lipitor. So many times you're going to get the generic names for those. Rosuvastatin and atorvastatin, which are very popular. In the higher doses, like 80 milligrams, many people do have the muscle enzymes that are going to be causing muscle pain and muscle atrophy, can raise liver enzymes, can actually give you GI problems and even cause diarrhea and stomach pain. So talk to your doctor if you're having those issues. The other thing that the rosuvastatin and atorvastatin can do is interfere with sleep. They are fat-soluble statins. The other ones, the other statins do not cross the blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier is like this kind of tissue covering around the brain to prevent toxins from crossing and injuring the brain. But atorvastatin and rosuvastatin do cross that blood-brain barrier and can cause sleep disturbances. So if you're on those medications and you're not sleeping well, it can be due many times to those statin medications. So if you switch to one of the statins that are not fat soluble, you may have less muscle pain, you may have less problems with liver enzymes going up, and you may sleep better. So like every medication, there are risks and there are benefits, and you got to outweigh which is, the benefits helping you more than the risks. So CoQ10 is a good idea if you're on a statin. Fish oils, there's a lot of controversy about that. Fish oils reduce inflammation. They are a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. Time. You want to get a good fish oil. They can lower triglycerides, which are another type of lipid in the body, like cholesterol. So they can block pathway of the blood and can cause increased risk of stroke. So blood will also get thinner if you're out taking an omega-3 fatty acid, like fish oils. So if you're on blood thinning medications like Pradaxa, Eliquis, warfarin, Coumadin, Brilinta is another one. There's a few more. You want to be careful. So speak with your doctor if you're taking a blood thinner before you add something like a fish oil. And fish oils lower blood pressure. So I actually have really low blood pressure almost all the time, except when I'm aggravated by family members or life in general.
Male family member.
There you go. I didn't say it, but you could go there. So if you're taking fish oils, especially larger amounts of them, what can actually happen is that it can lower blood pressure. So if you start out with low blood pressure and then you add a good dose of a fish oil to decrease inflammation from arthritis or to do some of the other things, lower triglycerides, what you can end up with is really low blood pressure, feeling like you're going to pass out. So a lot of these supplements can have benefits, but they can also have risk factors. So you got to look at all these things. If you're taking vitamin C, that thins the blood. If you're taking vitamin E, that thins the blood. If you're taking fish oils, that thins the blood. If you're taking a baby aspirin, that thins the blood. So if you're taking several things that thin the blood, you can end up with blood that's really thin. You can have a lot of, discoloration and bruising on your skin, and you don't want to be taking too much of a blood thinner. So discuss all that with your doctor, pharmacist, or dietitian, and I probably should give myself a little plug. My contact information is on here. I do free nutrition counseling through Office for the Aging. I do home visits and can meet you in a senior center or a library or wherever you'd like to meet and go over your medications, any special diet requirements or restrictions that you have, and it's a free service from Office for the Aging. So fiber.
Excellent.
Thank you. Fiber is really important to help lower cholesterol. It also helps keep us full when you eat something that's higher in fiber. It's going to prevent you from overeating, hopefully. So you got to be careful of things like bran muffins, which can be very healthy and high in fiber, but if they're throwing in a bunch of fat and sugar, a bran muffin at a local, and I won't say the name, restaurant with coffees and donuts and things like that, can be 700 calories. So make your own bran muffins. Try to leave out all that unhealthy fat. And you can substitute for oil in a recipe things like applesauce. And you can add things like ground flaxseed to a recipe, making sure that you increase the fiber, increase the water. Whenever you add fiber, you want to add water, because if you take too much fiber without enough water, you can get a blockage. So fiber will lower cholesterol, especially soluble fiber like the oatmeal. So I would say if you could eat an oatmeal every day and make it a non-sweetened one without a lot of sodium, you would be doing yourself a really good heart-healthy thing. And resveratrol, I don't know if you've heard about resveratrol. Resveratrol is what's in red wine that can be heart healthy. The American Heart Association does not want us to start drinking lots of red wine. Every night. So, like everything else, it's serving size, right? So one serving of red wine is not a bottle. It's 5 ounces. So if you can limit yourself to 5 ounces. And the other thing with alcohol, you have to, of any kind, whether it's wine or beer or whatever, you have to be sure that it's not going to interact with medications. There are a lot of medications that interact with alcohol, pain medications, things that will make you drowsy. The alcohol is just going to increase that effect. Some diabetes medications will also be affected by alcohol and may lower blood sugar erratically and sometimes hours after you drink it. So we don't want to be risking low blood sugar. So resveratrol comes in a supplement form. It's also in red grapes. Red grapes are one of the dirty dozen, so try to do organic red grapes. And it does have some studies that show that it lowers blood pressure, can have a positive effect on cholesterol, and is protective of the brain, which is always a good thing, and may improve insulin sensitivity, which helps with blood sugar control. So I know that's a lot of information, and I railed it off pretty quickly.
But thank you, you covered
Thank
a lot
you.
of bases.
I
Very
did cover a lot of
interesting.
bases. Oh, good. Thank
In
you
less
so
than
much.
an hour.
Yes, I did.
And you answered a lot of my questions.
Yes.
in the
So
beginning. Thank you.
my contact information's on here, and you can always call Orange County Office of Aging if you can't find my number or email address. They'll give you my my contact information.
Are they still doing, I'm sorry, are they still doing the videos on Zoom or
The
anything
webinars.
different?
The
than-
webinars?
Yes, the webinars.
Yes, so starting when we had COVID, I couldn't do live programs anymore, so I started
Right.
doing webinars. So if you email me at that email address on my handout, which is suegoshen@yahoo.com, Sue
Okay.
Goshen, just like the town of Goshen, @yahoo.com, we will send you an invitation to the webinars, which are on all kinds of health topics. The one we just
Yes,
had was on
I-
diabetes.
That was wonderful. When I was recuperating from an operation,
Mhm.
I got meals from for a while to get on my feet,
Mhm.
so I could be able to walk and to cook for myself. And I noticed one of those, and I was able to, through the help of Eddie here, get to how to do it, and they were very interesting.
Oh, good. And we also, thank you for saying that, we also have a library of past webinars that I've done.
Oh, really? Oh,
So if you email us and say, I'd like, a list of the ones that we have, and I've done acid reflux and heart health and bone health and diabetes and pretty much medications, every topic you can imagine, we can send you the links to those webinars and you can watch them at your convenience.
oh, that's wonderful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and so really, they're
Thank
there
you.
for a year. So, some of the older ones may not be there, but you could always ask for the ones that we've done, and I can send you the slides and the
Good.
notes from them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you do one-to-one?
I do one-to-ones,
So
yes.
I could send you I would send an email and make arrangements.
Absolutely, yes.
And Sue goes through your blood work like no doctor does, except a functional MD.
Yes, that's one of my specialties is helping to
She
analyze
loves
it.
blood
And
work.
I love blood work. It's like my favorite. It's like little puzzle pieces to figure out what can help you.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
You talk about bone health, which calcium is at my age anyway, what level. I can't take calcium. Calcium makes kidney stones develop
Okay.
big time.
So calcium, the main thing with calcium stones is proper hydration, and it also depends on what kind of calcium you're using. It's calcium citrate that is more likely to go to the bone and less likely to become calcium in stones. So I would say consider calcium citrate, but you can get calcium from the diet. You need 1,200 milligrams in a day.
That's the thing. I don't take the calcium. The doctor said to stop taking the calcium. I have high cholesterol, so I have to watch my diet when it comes to dairy products.
Okay.
I don't drink regular milk. I drink plant milk, and I try to use as many plant products as I can. I just don't know what else to supplement the fact that I don't take calcium.
So that's a really good concern, and I can't have dairy because dairy doesn't agree with me. So I do use plant-based milk substitutes. Probably the best one out there is macadamia milk, which many people don't know about. The type of calcium that they fortify in plant-based milk substitutes is really important. It's almost always calcium carbonate, which becomes stones or
Right.
becomes stiffening on the walls of the arteries. So I would say go with a calcium or tricalcium phosphate based plant milk as far as the fortified source of calcium. So Target has tricalcium phosphate in their almond milk.
Okay.
The market brand one that they have?
Mm-hmm. It's on the shelf, not in the refrigerator
Oh,
section.
that's where I've gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it kind of has a peculiar color, but it's fine. It's like a
I
little
know
yellower.
I look kind of when you look
So,
at them.
I would just say if you can look for a milk substitute that has the calcium phosphate or calcium triphosphate, that is going to go to the bones.
Okay.
The other thing that's important for bones is making sure that you have vitamin K2, which is MK7 specifically. There's like 3 kinds of vitamin K, 4 kinds of vitamin K. MK7 actually carries the calcium to the bone. So you can buy supplements. It's not in a lot of foods. If it is in foods, it's like kimchi and fermented Korean stew and things like that. So those are good sources. Do you? Okay, so that's good source of vitamin K. If you're on Coumadin or warfarin, you got to be careful with vitamin K.
I'm on Plavix.
Okay, so that has no dietary restrictions. I would say consider, if you send me your, email me.
You and I are going to meet.
Okay.
I need help.
But I have like the greatest handouts that I've developed
Good.
over 30 years, but they're always up to date on MK7, how to get it in foods, how to get it from supplements. You want a non-soy based, you want 180 micrograms. You got to be looking at magnesium is a big part of bone health too, and you want to be sure that you're getting good sources in the diet and even supplements in some cases. So just send me bone health handouts, and you will get inundated with information, and then you can bring the questions back to me.
Weight training, no?
Yes, weight training, weight bearing exercise for sure. Yep.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
I hope I haven't
Very
confused